In this week's drive, we endure a driver's worst nightmare. Join David as he makes history. Celebrate Yamaha's 50th anniversary in their old colours. And see a champion make a silly mistake. All this and more in this week's Drive. We start in Nuremberg in Germany for one of those rare events that brings back the stars. Triple world champion Emerson Fittipaldi back from Brazil. 4 times world champion Alain Prost came out of retirement. And so did Britain's Nigel Mansell, a former back-to-back Formula One and IndyCar champion. South Africa's only Formula One champion, Jody Scheckter. A Nomex balaclava was a novel experience for 5 times world motorcycle champ Mick Doohan. Prost, 50 years old and the last of the 6 to retire, dominated the 3-race event. Each of the drivers competed in 3 different models, Audi, Opel and Mercedes, all used in the DTM German touring car season. The 55-year-old Scheckter, champion in 1979 with Ferrari, provided the drama, spinning in his Mercedes. Early in his career, Jody was at the heart of some spectacular on-track carnage, including a huge first-lap crash in Britain that eliminated half the field. The Frenchman, who won the Formula One title in 1985, 86 and 93, took the early lead in the first race. But this time he earned 6 points for his win in the first heat driving the Audi, with Brazilian Fittipaldi finishing second to claim 5 points. After World Championship titles with McLaren and Williams, Prost bought and ran his own Formula One team, but it eventually floundered and was liquidated. Race 2 saw the 59-year-old Fittipaldi, world champion in 1972 and 74, switching to an Opel. Mansell, the 52-year-old Briton who won the Formula One title in 92, changed from Opel to Audi, while Prost faced some problems in his Mercedes. Johnny Cecotto, the 49-year-old from Venezuela, won the 350cc bike title in 1975, followed by the 750 crown 3 years later. He raced in Formula One in the early 1980s as Ayrton Senna's teammate at Tollman and has had a successful career racing European touring cars for BMW, winning the German Super Touring Championship as recently as 1998. He led the second race for a while before Prost recovered to claim his second win. Mansell, driving a Mercedes, finished the third race in 4th place. After his championship, Mansell cleaned up in America but made an abortive return to Formula One with dismal results. Fittipaldi, 5th in the second race and this time driving an Audi, emerged as the winner of the third and final heat. Prost got 3 points for his third place in the final race to win the challenge with a total of 16 points. Alain received a cheque for €500,000, the money going to different charities. Fittipaldi finished second overall with a total of 13 points. Cecotto was surprisingly third overall with 12 points after 2 second places and a 5th. Mansell was 4th on 10 points ahead of Scheckter with 8. Doohan, the 40-year-old Australian who won 5 consecutive 500cc motorcycling world titles from 1994 to 98, was last among the legends, finding the DTM four-wheelers less nimble than his usual mount, a fearsome 2-stroke Honda. Temperatures were high as NASCAR came to Chicago. Jimmy Johnson started from pole position but quickly fell behind. The heat proved to be quite an issue. The rubber in the tyres began to blister, causing numerous blowouts and mayhem. The first was experienced by Carl Edwards. He blew the right front tyre on his Ford on the 79th lap, sending him into the wall. He dropped from 4th in the title to 12th. Casey Kane found the wall on lap 126 when Jamie McMurray rear-ended him, causing him to fishtail up the banking and into the barrier. Elliott Sadler's Ford hit the wall on the 164th of 267 laps on the 1.5-mile oval after blowing out his right front tyre.
You should come in the pits and change your tires, but you don't want to make the wrong call and come.
Confusingly, tyre experts said the tyres were not wearing fast enough to cool the rubber, causing blistering and the blowouts. That was of little consequence to Michael Waltrip, who blew one on lap 215. The car slammed into the first turn, ruining the entire side of it and ending Waltrip's day. 4-time series champion Jeff Gordon went out on lap 249 when Greg Bliss tapped him from behind. spinning him into the wall. Gordon finished 33rd, his sixth finish of 30th or lower in the last 8 races. The accident gave the leaders a last chance to pit for fuel. Scott Wimmer stayed on the track and took the lead. The green flag came out on lap 255 and Earnhardt soon passed Wimmer, who then faded quickly to finish 17th. Meanwhile, Matt Kenseth charged towards the front, grabbing second place from Brian Vickers on lap 261. But Kenseth couldn't catch Earnhardt, finishing about 5 car lengths back. With the victory, Earnhardt snapped a 19-race winless streak that dated back to November last year in Phoenix. Kenseth led for 176 laps, but it was Earnhardt who took the checkered flag, grabbing his first victory of the season and the 16th of his career. In the city more known for ice hockey, the Champ Car races took to the streets of Toronto. French reigning champion Sébastien Bourdais had pole position as the race got underway, and he would hold the lead for 34 laps. Bourdais came into the race trailing local Paul Tracy by just 1 point in the standings. Tracy and Bourdais exited the pits together following their first stops. Bourdais cut his rear tyre when he sliced across Tracy's car and had to make a second stop that took him out of contention. Officials determined the contact that sheared off Tracy's left front wing to be a racing incident and levied no penalties. But the bigger story was Paul's incredible ability keeping the car in front with an aero configuration that should have made it undrivable. A major error in fuel calculation took Tracy out of the race, and his fans were denied the chance to see if PT could claim a third home track win.
Tracy, horrible luck for the
Just 1 lap after the caution for the slowing Tracy was lifted, another was forced. Cristiano D'Amato was clipped by Alex Sperafico and slid into the wall. But immediately after that green flag was waved, there was a 3-car pile-up on the same bend. Marcus Marshall clipped Nelson Felipe, who spun and hit Timo Glock. As that caution was lifted, Oriol Sevilla had the lead, but Justin Wilson was close behind. Wilson made his move on lap 77, passing Sevilla on the inside of the third turn on the 1.7-mile temporary street course. But the race would end under caution after AJ Allmendinger, Wilson's teammate for the Russ Sport team, crashed as he was closing in on Sevilla for second place. Allmendinger brushed the wall, then careered across the track into a tyre barrier. Mario Dominguez then slammed into Allmendinger, who was a sitting duck at that point, to bring out a caution with 7 laps to go. The clean-up from the crash took a long time, with carbon fibre pieces everywhere. The result was that the race would end under a yellow flag due to the 1 hour and 45-minute time allocated to live television coverage.
Over Justin Wilson of Northampton, England.
The unusually tall ex-Formula One driver Wilson, who was dropped mid-season by the Jaguar team, crossed the finish line after 86 laps to collect his first Champ Car victory in 20 starts. Sevilla, Alex Tagliani, Jimmy Vasser and Bourdais completed the top 5. And Wilson's victory moved him into third in the series standings, 22 points behind Bourdais.
What a first victory.
Thanks so much. Yeah, it seems hard to believe that we finally made it. The guys worked so hard. I'm so pleased for the Boost Sport team, especially seeing as here we got a new sponsor, CDW, so couldn't ask for more really. The car was great in that last stint, was able to make a few moves and got to the front.
Bourdais now has a 15-point lead over Tracy. With just over a month to go before the inaugural Turkish Grand Prix, David Coulthard and his Red Bull Racing team flew into town to create a little bit of history recently. The plan was to make the crossing over the famous Bosphorus Bridge in Istanbul that connects Asia to Europe in Coulthard's Formula One car. It was also a great way of drumming up support for the Grand Prix on the 21st of August. A big crowd had gathered, including a large TV and radio contingent, to see Coulthard and his Formula One machine. The show started from the garden of an Ottoman Empire palace, Dolmabahce, on the European side. Police sealed off his route and stopped bridge traffic. Coulthard has been grabbing the headlines recently, not so much for his performance on the track, but for his opinions off it. The Scotsman and his peers are concerned that medical backup in testing is far below the standards offered at race weekends, and they want urgent talks with the world governing body, the FIA. Coulthard, one of the oldest and most experienced men still racing in Formula One, has been the most outspoken of the drivers and has even talked of strike action by them if their concerns about safety are not addressed. However, those concerns were far from his mind after being given the starting flag by the Turkish Minister for Tourism, Attila Kok. The 13-time Grand Prix winner then made his way through the ancient streets of Istanbul, where the contrast of old meets new could not have been more apparent. Coulthard drove a 6-kilometre-long lap of honour through the city, which has a population of 15 million, and then passed over the 1-kilometre-long bridge. However, no speed records were broken, as Coulthard could only drive the car at a speed of 120 kilometres an hour due to the bumpy road and the car's unforgiving suspension. Making his way back to the palace, where his support team were waiting, he was able to give the locals a taste of the noise and excitement that they can expect next month. Pulling back into the palace, there was the slight problem of a fire in the engine bay, caused by driving the car for too long at too low a speed. With just 17 points so far this season and currently lying in 11th position in the Drivers' Championship, Coulthard will be hoping that this visit will mean local support will be on his side next month. David seemed to enjoy the experience.
Very bumpy going over the bridge, so that was very difficult, but nonetheless it was great to see such a nice reception from the public.
Formula One headed into Germany and Hungary before it goes to the Turkish capital. Top of the celebrity list at Laguna Seca for the US MotoGP was Brad Pitt, and he visited the garage of reigning world champion Valentino Rossi. The Yamaha team turned out in the classic yellow colours made famous by Kenny Roberts Sr. Rossi may have dominated MotoGP for years, but the Italian had been forced to take a back seat in practice to Nicky Hayden. The American had dominated practice and qualifying and used his pole position to good advantage. This was Hayden's first Grand Prix pole position in his 38th Grand Prix start. His previous best qualifying was second at Mugello last year. Some of the pressure was taken off Rossi when his closest rival in the championship didn't even survive the first lap, as Marco Melandri crashed along with Alex Barros. Behind Hayden, Rossi and his teammate Colin Edwards, Troy Bayliss held off Kenny Roberts Jr. and Max Biaggi. Carlos Checa was the next faller. A disappointing year shows no signs of improving for the Spaniard. Edwards shook off his pursuers to make third place his own. Biaggi was now involved in a fierce tussle with Sete Gibernau. Both riders were once much vaunted as potential threats to Rossi's unbeaten run as MotoGP champion, but have failed to do so. For several laps, Hayden, Rossi and Edwards kept station, a Honda followed by two Yamahas. Rossi had won 9 of the previous 10 MotoGP races, the exception being second place to Barros in Portugal. In addition, Rossi is the only rider in the top 8 qualifiers who's never previously competed at Laguna Seca in a US Championship, Grand Prix or World Superbike race. But he couldn't hold on to second place. A dogged Edwards made it a great day for the US. That capped the world champion's worst performance of the season. But let's put things in context. Worst means third place, and Rossi had just come off the back of 5 straight MotoGP wins. It just goes to prove that he's not quite infallible. Hayden's previous best result in MotoGP was a third place in Germany last year, but the 23-year-old led every one of the 32 laps. And out in front of a sellout crowd of 58,000, with Edwards and Rossi still pushing, Hayden took the checkered flag. Edwards was second, 2 seconds behind, with Rossi third, 2 tenths further back. A Hayden win had always looked likely after his sparkling performance in the build-up. He was overjoyed, and why not? It's been a long time since he's won anything other than hearts.
It just feels so good to win. I mean, it's been since 2002 since I won anything other than the dating game, and just to win the GP feels awesome. And my team and my bike, just everything felt good today, and it just clicked. And I just got out front and just kept going as hard as I could. I mean, sometimes I would see the gap get smaller, and I just rolled my heart out and just kept pushing. And today was my day, thanks to my team. I mean, these guys pushed me hard, but just, man, every dog has their day, and just it all clicked for me today and feels really, really nice.
A 10th consecutive podium for Rossi, but this was Hayden and America's day. Rossi's third place at Laguna Seca was his 109th podium at a Grand Prix, equaling the podium finishes achieved by Max Biaggi. Giacomo Agostini leads the list with 159 podiums. The Superbike World Championship Tour moved to Brno in the Czech Republic for the 7th of 12 rounds this season. Troy Corser started on pole and led into the first corner. The opening race proved to be something of a procession for the Australian as he led from pole position to the checkered flag. Corser clearly likes the Brno track. He won both races last time the series visited the Czech Republic, way back in 1996. Reigning world champion James Toseland was unable to come close to the Suzuki rider, finishing a distant second, 7 seconds behind. Toseland's Ducati teammate, Frenchman Reggie Laconi, put in a battling display to fight his way up from 9th on the grid to 3rd. Englishman Chris Walker made progress to take 4th place for Kawasaki. Pier Francesco Chili brought his Honda home in 5th place, with his fellow Italian Lorenzo Lanzi completing the top 6 for Ducati. If the day's first race was a touch predictable, the second was anything but. Once again, former World Superbike champ Troy Corser maintained his lead off the grid and into the first corner. However, the Australian was passed at the end of the opening lap by Laconi's Ducati. The Frenchman was left cursing his luck, though, as a red flag brought a temporary halt to proceedings after local rider Marek Svoboda slid off thanks to an oil slick dropped by another rider. An army of marshals tackled the oil, which was right on the racing line. As only a couple of laps were completed, the race was restarted half an hour later as a new 20-lap race with no reference to the running order before the red flag came out. Once again, Troy Corser stayed ahead from pole position to the first corner. But once again, the Suzuki rider was passed, this time by Japanese rider Noriyuki Haga, who discovered a new turn of pace to storm through the field after starting down in 17th place. At the halfway point in the 20-lap race, Haga had built a 1.5-second buffer over Corser, who in turn had 4 seconds to Norik Abe, who continued to keep the factory Ducati riders behind him. By lap 14, Haga had stretched his lead over Corser out to a full 2 seconds. Haga took a brilliant win over Corser by 3.2 seconds, but the overall win went to Corser, who extends his championship lead over Vermeulen to 94 points. Vermeulen's 3rd position extends his 2nd place ahead of Laconi to 18 points. The World Motocross Championship moved south of the equator to Sun City for round 11 of 17 in the series. In the MX1 category, reigning champion Stefan Everts took his first pole position for almost 2 years. His last was at Namur in 2003. Everts rode competently throughout, with his biggest threat in the early stages, Ben Townley, the KTM-mounted New Zealand, who started the race 3rd in the overall standings behind Everts and Joshua Coppens of Honda. With wood chips mixed with a tough soil to soften the ground, the terrain provided more grip and different lines to the riders. Up front, Townley suffered a spill that dented his chances of winning the race. That allowed Coppens on his Honda to attack, and Everts could not respond. They were running into slower traffic by the 5th lap. The pace was frantic, and Coppens surged ahead with minutes remaining in the heat to beat the 8-times world champ. The difference at the flag was just over a second. The New Zealander finished ahead of 2 Belgians, Everts and Steve Ramon on his KTM. Coppens needed a good result in the second moto to keep in touch with title leader Everts, and he had the perfect start. For spectators of race 2, there may have been a sense of déjà vu, with the same top 3 riders as in the opening race. Eventually, Coppens and Everts detached themselves again, but the racing was less intense and Everts managed to escape as Coppens was plagued by cramp. With a healthy lead, the Belgian was waving to fans on the final lap when, incredibly, he lost control of his machine and crashed. He remounted quickly, but damage to the front brake meant that Coppens was able to reel him in and overtake. Everts was furious with his rookie error afterwards, and the fall gave Coppens the momentum to go on for his 2nd Grand Prix win of the day, scooping another winner's trophy. The results ensured that Coppins took a maximum of 50 points from the Grand Prix of South Africa, with Everts having to settle for 44, his advantage shrinking to just 39 points. Wet weather made for treacherous conditions in Italy, 7th of 10 outdoor trials. 7-time former outdoor champion Dougie Lamkin was aiming to put his title campaign back on track after losing ground to his rivals at the previous round of the season in France. The Briton could only manage a 4th place finish on day 1, but he reached the podium on Sunday, narrowly missing out on 2nd place. Lamkin finished day 2 in 3rd place with 37 penalty points, just one more than up-and-coming rider Hironi Fajardo. The Spanish gas rider struggled on day 1 and he ended up in a disappointing 9th place. However, Fajardo responded admirably on Sunday, exhibiting impressive form on the way to claiming 2nd place. Reigning indoor champion Adam Raga is chasing his first outdoor title. The Spaniard has an 8-point title lead over compatriot and nearest rival Albert Capestany. That advantage increased when Raga took 1st place on Saturday and Capestany finished 3rd. On Sunday, Raga could only manage 4th, but Capestany would end the day 9th and slip to 3rd in the championship. As the challenge of one rider falls by the wayside, another emerges, and Takahisa Fujinami won't be a welcome sight to Raga. Fujinami, the reigning outdoor world champion, moved up to 2nd place in the overall standings after picking up 37 of a maximum 40 championship points over the 2 days. The Japanese Honda rider's campaign stalled in France, where he followed a 5th place finish on day 1 with a 9th on day 2. But a 2nd place in Italy on Saturday, followed by a win on Sunday, saw Fujinami move up into 2nd place in the standings. He sits 17 points behind Raga with 3 rounds of the season remaining. Fujinami continues his pursuit of Raga at the Grand Prix of Great Britain. Covering 100 metres every 1.3 seconds is travelling pretty quickly. A world record quickly, in fact, for a couple of serious motorcycle enthusiasts from New Zealand's South Island.
That's the record.
You've got the record?
We have.
They've created the fastest bike with a sidecar ever built. Glenn Hayward and Phil Garrett took their Flying Kiwi to 272 kilometres an hour along an ordinary stretch of open road, minus the traffic, of course.
Yeah, absolutely awesome. Very exciting. I just wanted to go faster.
It's taken 3.5 years and around $140,000 of investment to overtake the previous record of 222 kilometres an hour set back in 1986.
We've broken the record.
Garrett did 264 kilometres an hour, but his teammate went quicker.
274 kilometres on your last run, and I got 264. You bastard.
The pressure was on the team as bad weather threatened to ruin the attempt for the day, but they managed it.
A very surreal sensation. It's a cross between flying and dreaming.
The record is yet to be ratified, but for the Swiss FIM timing official, that's just a formality.
So that is definitely the fastest sidecar with a 1000cc engine.
As Garrett celebrated, his wife was just as delighted. Now she gets her husband back.
We're going to chill out and spend some time together, which hasn't happened a lot lately.
Looking this way?
Now they want to take the Flying Kiwi to the Bonneville Salt Flats. So whether you're spinning like the old times, sliding to another win, or slipping into the wall, so you stay on track and up to speed, make sure you catch next week's Drive.